I wasn't really sure which Rayman game I wanted to review next. After playing all 3 in the main series, I had a couple of different avenues. Maybe I'd go back and do some of the spin-offs that came earlier, or move forward and play the more recent 2D platformers. Then, it became clear. There was one Rayman spin-off that was far more important than any other, and if you saw the title and thumbnail of this video, you know exactly which one that was. Rayman Raving Rabbids, released as a launch title for the Nintendo Wii in 2006 and ported to the other current consoles shortly thereafter. What I think puts Rabbids into its own territory in terms of the Rayman spin-offs is twofold. The first reason being that, of course, it was the only spin-off to become so wildly popular and profitable that it splintered off of Rayman and became a major IP in its own right. The second reason is that this game is really controversial among the Rayman fandom. Scroll through the comments of any Rabbids video and you will find people lamenting that this game even exists, and it's not exactly hard to see why they feel this way. Back in the years leading up to this game's launch, some of the earliest marketing material pitches this game as much more of a traditional 3D platforming adventure like previous games in the series were. Rayman 4 was the tentative title for the game in development, and you can even navigate your way to the game's directory on the PC version and see the files referring to themselves in such a way. The point of this intro so far is that, thanks to the power of hindsight, I'm not one of the people going into this game with false expectations. Almost 13 years have passed since this game first came out, so let's go back and see exactly what this game is and whether or not it's still enjoyable today, even if it's not Rayman 4. Raving Rabbids begins with a small cutscene of Rayman enjoying a casual picnic. Suddenly, his leisure is disturbed by a bunch of subterranean Rabbids, and the brute among them drags Rayman off to be a champion in their gladiatorial games. That is basically all you need to know about the story and premise for this game. You compete in a variety of different minigames. There are 4 minigames a day, and you need to complete at least 3 of them to unlock the boss fight for that day. Beat the boss fight, get thrown back into your lodgings for the night, then do it all again when the sun rises once more. This framework is one that remains constant throughout the entirety of what Raving Rabbids asks from you from its 4-hour main campaign. And make no mistake, despite the fact that this is a minigame collection, the campaign really is the focus here. The lean multiplayer options revolve around you picking out individual trials to compete against with your friend, and there really isn't any structured option to put those minigames into a proper gauntlet or party mode. On top of that, most of the minigames really feel like they were built as single player first and made multiplayer later. They will usually just take the single player minigame and divide the actions between 2 players, rather than adding something new, which is disappointing. I'd say the most enjoyable way to play this with a friend is just to hand off the controller in between minigames. With the multiplayer being kind of drab and the story itself being the bare minimum, there's one major reason to play the game outside of the minigames themselves. That reason? The Rabbids. The Rabbids are hilarious. These little guys are the kings of slapstick. Most of the challenges here involve the Rabbids getting hurt in increasingly creative ways, such as this button mashing challenge where you beat this Rabbid with a hammer, and a soccer free kicking game where the Rabbid is the ball. The game dresses and dolls them up in the silliest of manners just to get a chuckle out of you. Each themed challenge will usually have the Rabbid donning era-appropriate attire, like cowboy Rabbids and beach lounging Rabbids. There's also the occasional curveball, like Rabbids rappelling down on screen while dressed as Sam Fisher. I actually laughed out loud the first time I saw the Superman-inspired Rabbid and his adoring fans. It's really not hard to see why these guys spun off into their own series. They're always doing something goofy every time they're on screen, and their signature noises are infectiously funny. And now, the minigames. I would say that the minigames themselves are mostly a win. They are challenges usually about a minute or so in length that have a great amount of variety. Seeing the campaign through to its ending will have you brushing up against each individual minigame about twice, with the second time being a more advanced version of the first. The quality of the games themselves vary, but I would say the overwhelming bulk of them manage to be good, or at the very least, humorous. Spraying carrot juice into the snorkels of incoming rabbit hordes, smacking rabid choir boys who are singing out of key, slamming the door shut on rabbids using public restrooms, all of these and more are the activities you can expect to do on the journey. They are simple enough that they can be explained in a small one-screen instruction section prior to each challenge beginning, and the best of them will have you wanting to replay for even better scores. The weak minigames that stand out are the ones that really deviate from the hilarity of the Rabbids too much. Look at this one where you navigate this icon around screen to avoid the ghosts. It's so lifeless and it really sticks out. It's a good thing that minigames like it count themselves among the minority here. The more keystone boss minigames are ones that you can expect to see even more than twice throughout the adventure here, but with good reason, seeing as how they are generally more involved. An example of one of these is an on-rails shooter where you gun down rabbids with a plunger gun. These sequences justify their frequency and longer length by having multiple different mechanics, such as shooting, grabbing, and power-ups. They also have enemy variety with different weak spots and patterns. I also found a lot of joy in this warthog racing minigame. The unwieldy and slippery control of these beasts made them a real challenge just to navigate around simple turns, and I'm glad that this one pops its head up like 3 or 4 times over the duration of the game. Adding to the amusement of the zany rabbit antics is the fact that you can dress up Rayman himself too. By completing certain challenges, you will unlock a bunch of different costumes for Rayman, each of which can be mixed and matched from within your wardrobe. They give a great reason to go back and do extra minigames you may have skipped the first time, and are also one more reason to walk around your bedroom. The small living space that the Rabbids assign you, which gets increasingly more comfortable as they grow more elated with your performance, can be walked around in. You can access games from the previous days here, as well as listen to music from the jukebox. More music can be unlocked by participating in the dancing minigame. It's probably worth mentioning that this dancing minigame is another heavily pushed minigame. It's always 1 out of the 4 trials that you can challenge daily, but each day has a different track to keep it fresh. Some of these tunes are even licensed, so expect to break it down to the Black Eyed Peas at least once. What I think separates Rayman Raving Rabbids the most from its platforming predecessors, aside from the change in genre, is just a general lack of polish. It's a shame I felt this way after my completion of the game, but this is one of the only Rayman games I've played that felt rushed, and we can only assume that the necessity to make this a Wii launch title was one of the primary reasons why. The presentation can be a little all over the place. Some parts of the game look fantastic, like Rayman himself. Other times, the game looks like it belongs on the N64. Taking a closer look at your background dancers in the rhythm minigame reveals eyes that are more square than they are circle. Insanely low poly models are only one-upped by cheering crowds that are heavily pixelated sprites rather than proper 3D models. And this lack of polish puts its hands into the gameplay too. One consistent annoyance was that the win state of all the games is something that gets displayed to you in a pre-game instruction screen, but nowhere at all once you are actually inside playing the game. There's usually a win condition of hitting a certain point value, but the game doesn't notify you when you hit it, allowing you to continue on until you lose. This means that all the games unceremoniously ended with me messing something up, only to realize that I actually won like 20 seconds earlier, as seen by Rayman doing the same little post-game success dance he does for every single other challenge. A simple thumbs up that popped up on screen when you hit the point value would be all we needed to get that nice feedback, and without an equivalent, I feel like I was playing these games in the dark. None of these annoyances are huge deals, but them and other examples like them are just little inconsistencies that I've come to expect this series not to have. I feel like the simple question of whether or not I would recommend this game is far more weird and nuanced than most of my other reviews. There's definitely a good chunk of people out there who swore this game off forever because it's not Rayman 4, and that position isn't exactly unjustified given that this game is definitely weaker than what came before it. I would say that among minigame collections, Rayman Raving Rabbids is one of the best in breed and it exudes quality and polish, but among Rayman games and spin-offs, it probably sits somewhere closer to the bottom. For the very small amount of time this game asks out of you, I would say give it a shot. It's not perfect, but I can almost guarantee that you will find something worth laughing at. I give the game a thumbs up, but just pretend this whole video is a decently sized asterisk that sits next to that big blue thumb.